Hello, this is Minder Chen. I'm professor of Management Information System at Martin Smith School of Business and Economics at California State University, Channel Island. Last time we have discussed personality, and today we're going to move on a little bit and we'll cover the attitude of a person and how that may have affect their work behaviors. And to continue actually the coverage of personality, we're going to bring up emotional intelligence, or sometimes we call it emotional quotients, which is considered part of the personality that some people do think it's very important, and it actually affects how we manage ourselves and others. And EI or EQ is ability to identify, assess, and control our own emotions, and sometimes actually to identify, assess, and control other people's emotions. And in EI's ability model, there are four types of abilities, which is perceiving yourself or other people's emotion, and understanding this emotions. So this is kind of part of the identify and assess. And the control mentioned previously is related to using or controlling emotion, and in the broader sense, manage our emotion or sometimes even other people's emotion. But I think the first step is to manage your own emotion, which may be quite difficult. There's a scientific research which found that the emotions or the ability to recognize emotion is really part of the human gene. And we used to think there are 6 emotions: happy, sad, disgusted, angry, afraid, and surprised. In the study, which I have a link here, it actually showed that probably there's only 4 biologically based emotion, which is happy, sad, afraid, and surprised is in one category, and angry and disgusted is another category. And the study is really limited and based on facial expression, like what you're saying here. However, a lot of time we may need to rely on kind of a body language plus the facial expression, or even the tone of somebody's voice, to, like over the phone, sometimes somebody on the other end of the line is angry. So there are multiple sensory information that we will gather to sense the emotion of other people. There's a Pixar movie called Inside Out, and I strongly encourage you to, if you have a chance to, if you haven't, watch this movie. It's actually talk about a little girl called Riley, and the movie actually create kind of personality based on the internal, which is inside, the internal emotion of Riley. In this case, there's a joy, sadness, anger, disgust, and fears. And this is actually a very good example that even in movie making, they rely on some scientific research about emotion to create as a theoretical base for this movie. I'm not going to ruin your kind of pleasure in watching this movie. However, just give you a little bit hint. We usually think joy, very positive thinking, is the best kind of emotion which we should promote. But in this movie, towards the end, you find out that sometimes other emotion has its place, its usefulness. So I'll just stop here and for you to think about it. If we kind of extend it a little bit, it's just like yin and yang, which we talk about when we talk about personality. There's yang tends to be very positive, tends to be good, but sometimes yin has its place. And in Chinese, there's a Chinese classic called Central Harmony, which is sometimes translated as the golden means. It emphasizes a more balanced and moderated view on your own emotion and also on how you view things in the world. And I'm going to just read this translation from Chinese, which means that we do have the joy, anger, sad, grief, pleasure inside ourselves. And when it's not awakened or triggered by the external event, then that's your true self, which you have all emotion, but probably not expressed yet. But when this emotion or passion has been awakened and expressed, then we will try to kind of manage this emotion to attain due measure and degree, and such that we can reach something we call it harmony or central harmony. The central here, or the middle here, really means inside yourself. So you need to have a kind of more peaceful mind and mindset, and take a more moderate approach and when you try to deal with the problem and trouble you face in your life. And the same philosophy can be found in the Western world. Socrates teach us that we need to know how to choose the mean and avoid extreme. So the mean and extreme are the opposite side. And so we try to avoid the extreme on either side. There's extreme yin and extreme yang, and we try to kind of have a more harmonious state, which is the mean, the middle, the central harmony. And as far as possible, not only in life, this is not just for your life or for your emotion, but in all that which is to come. And for this, the way of happiness, if you can have a more moderate and balanced view. But in order to have a balanced view, you actually need to study the two extreme. Not that you want to go to the two extreme, but you need to understand the two extreme and find the trade-off, and then find how you can integrate them into a harmonious kind of state. And Aristotle kind of described the golden mean as a desirable middle between two extremes, same from Socrates, and one of the excess and the other of deficiency. So you don't want to be too much or too little. Certain emotion or personal trait, and also this can apply to analyzing different strategy or management approach. As an example, courage certainly is a virtue, but if taken to excess, that would manifest as a recklessness. However, if you don't have enough courage, then it becomes cowardice. So this is kind of difficult for anybody try to find the right balance. Where is the middle point? The middle point, in my opinion, is actually a dynamic state, which depends on the situation. If you use your emotions. Sometimes anger can help you, because there's a situation that show your anger will let people know that how serious the problem is, so that everybody would take corrective measure to fix the problem. But however, you shouldn't let anger kind of control yourself. You should actually control your emotion, including anger and other emotion, to help you to work with other people to work out the problem. In The Art of War by Sun Tzu, which is a classic military strategy book, pretty well known even in the business and management world. Let me just read it. The ruler should not start a war out of anger. Okay. The general should not be engaged in a battle out of rage, which is anger again. If the situation is advantageous, then make the move. If it's not advantageous, stop the move. This means that if you can control your emotion, you can turn your anger into happiness, your rage to joy. Remember, a destroyed nation, a destroyed person, a destroyed organization, and cannot exist again. The dead cannot be brought back to life. So you need to be particularly involved. You should not make a decision based on your emotion. Okay. Let's move on to values. When we look at a person, not just their personality traits, we also need to kind of assess what they believe in their life, what's considered most important to them. Although this is kind of difficult to get a sense, particular other people's value. But if you're more sensitive and more careful, there's a way to figure it out, at least to a certain extent. There's a list of value. I'm not going to go over to explain each one of them, but this value include achievement, benevolence, which is desire to protect the well-being of those close to yourself, conformity, which we try to conform to standard, hedonism, which is desire for pleasure. There's nothing wrong. And some people, for instance, if you're in the entertainment industry, if you work in the Disney's theme park, then if your value is hedonism, they may want to look at employee who has this value in them. Power, people just power hunger, they're grabbing the power as much as they can. And people who play safe, who want security, people who are self-motivated, independent, people who like excitement, stimulation, and people who are very traditional, follow the traditional ideas. And all those are the value. And they all, if used in the right way, contribute to an organization. And the value eventually related to our perception or viewpoint. The way you see things and other people's may affect your attitude, which has sometimes become your attitude, is the most important factor in your success. And so in the textbook, they use the term called perception instead of viewpoint. I prefer actually a different point of view, what perspective you're looking at things. So if you look at this image just for a few seconds, and tell me what you think, what you see actually in this picture. Okay. Some people see actually a vase. If you look at the white area, the profile of the white area, you see a vase. However, if you see the black colored portion, you see two side facial profile of two persons kind of talking to each other. Okay, so it's the same image, but depends on your perspective. People may actually see different things, and this is important just because it's not just for this visual image. In a lot of things, when it happened, people with different viewpoint may see it totally differently. This is where conflict may arise, and this is where, if we do have multiple perspective in viewing the same thing, it helps us to understand the complexity of the problem we're facing, and also understand why some people maybe react differently than us. Okay, let's move on. Self-perception, which sometimes we do have bias. Here we call it self-enhancement, which means we have kind of overconfidence in terms of what we can accomplish, and the other, it's called modesty bias. Is some people are more conservative. Oh, I don't know whether I can do it. I think I can, but I'm not 100% sure. But in reality, they're very capable of doing so. So when somebody say they can definitely do it, and somebody say, oh, they may not be able to do it, you may need to look at their self-perception, what kind of self-perception they may have, or you have. And so that's this is where understand the self-perception of yourself and others may help you. Social perception, as an example, like stereotype. We tend to develop stereotype and then easily classify people or things into those stereotypes. And this is how minds work. We sometimes do need those stereotypes to make a quick decisions. However, stereotype can forcefully kind of lead us to the wrong decision just because we ignore other signal or information. This is related to a little bit to self-fulfilling prophecy, and because we believe in something, and then we would selectively collect information to prove what we think is right. And the last related to social perception is first impression. Believe it or not, there's a study that actually showed that it takes about 7 seconds to kind of form the first impression on others. And another study actually showed even it's just less than a second, people may form next impression. And why this is important? This means that if you have a job interview, it is very important for you to present yourself the way you want it very early in the interview process. And remember, it's only 7 seconds for other people to form their first impression on you. Attitude. Attitude is a point of view. So attitude is really closely related to that point of view or perceptions. This can be negative or positive, can be about an idea, situation, or person. And so sometimes we said it like, oh, I think you have an attitude. So attitude, in that case, it's probably a negative. There's a negative connotation in that expression, but attitude could be a very positive attitude. The favorable attitude are about those ideal situation or people that are associated with positive reward benefit. So people will have a more positive attitude for things that benefit them, and which will reward them. If something which may end up leads to penalty and value, then they will develop an unfavorable attitude. There's a popular book called Attitude is Everything by Jeff Keller. If you're interested in studying the effect of attitude, this will be an interesting book to get hold of. And we did mention attitude can be positive or negative. And there's a long history in the popular kind of management consultants promoting positive thinking. And we want to be strategically optimistic, and however, we do want to play defensive, which really means we need to be pessimistic about what may go wrong. So the best of the both worlds is to prepare for the worst and hope for the best. And so when we're facing a situation, we need to consider the pros and the cons, and we need to consider what's possible, what are the opportunities, but at the same time consider risk involved. At Southwest Airlines, they have a saying stated the following: hire for attitude and train for skills. In this case, they do believe that attitude probably cannot be trained or changed. So in the interview process, they actually look for people who has the right attitude, which fit Southwest Airlines cultures. And so they do emphasize your character before your credential, your attitude over your aptitude. They hire people for who they are first, and then what they know second. Because they say, we will train you on whatever it is that you have to do at Southwest Airlines. But the one thing Southwest cannot change in person is inherent attitudes. That's by the CEO of Southwest Airlines. So to conclude this sessions, we'll just look at just conceptually, this is how a lot of topic and factor that we have discussed so far are related to each other, which means that personality may affect our work attitudes, and our work attitude may certainly affect our work behavior. And perception or viewpoint certainly is the link, at least that's my belief, a link between the personality and the work attitude, which are closely related to each other. And so when you look at the attitude of somebody's work attitude, it may be affected by their personality, the job itself, and also it's very important to look at the fit. When Southwest Airlines looking for somebody's attitude or personality for certain job, it's related to certain job and certain organization. There's no one fits all attitude or personality, and that's very important. And psychological contract, it's not a written contract, but it's just that kind of implicitly the employer, employee, or manager and the subordinate kind of agree upon implicitly. Organizational justice means that we treat people fairly, we have rules that we follow, and we have good working relationship, and then the workplace is not so stressful. The work attitude that has two elements, which may lead to your job satisfaction and also your commitment to your organization. To some extent, that's part of we may call it loyalty to a certain extent. The work behavior may measure in terms of the performance of the people, the job performance. And organizational citizen behavior, this is a technical term. Pay attention to this. OCB, organizational citizen behavior, is not the same as organizational commitment. It's kind of related. Organizational citizen behavior basically means that people are willing to do things which they're not paying for on their job, and because they just want to be a good citizen. To a certain extent, that's because they do have commitment. They have the commitment to the organization, which leads to this kind of citizen behavior. And on the more negative side, there's absenteeism, which means people may not show up to work. If you have a sick, if you're sick and calling in advance, that's not considered absenteeism. Turnover rate, high turnover rate is always a problem when people are too stressful and they don't think they are treated fairly. They're not happy about the job they're working on and they don't have high commitment. That's probably would translate into high turnover rate. So in conclusion, we'll find out that personality, personal trait, and the attitude people may have, their work attitude particularly, may lead to different kinds of work behavior. So understand the personality trait and people's attitude, their perceptions, how they view things, what they value, all important for us to understand, and in terms of how people may behave. And then there's certain things as a manager we can do. For instance, we can make sure that we do things fairly in the organizations, and we try to have a more friendly kind of working environment that people enjoy, come to work, and that will eventually improve the job performance, the productivity of the people that you hire. Okay, that's it. Thank you. I'll see you next time.